Thank you for joining us for another episode of Sherburne SWCD Summer podcast series. My name is Lilly Bowman. I'm a district technician here at the Soil and Water Conservation District, and today we're going to be discussing direct marketing strategies for small farms. Joined here today with local extension educator in small farms and local foods, Lauren Heers, as well as Josh Krenz, the owner and operator of Windland Flats. First, I'd like to give Lauren and Josh the opportunity to introduce themselves and hear a little bit about their position and operation. Lauren, why don't you go ahead and start us off?
Yes, thank you, Lily. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here today. I am the small farm and local foods educator for Stearns, Benton, Morrison, and Sherburne County. So I cover Fort Quad County area. Central Minnesota, I started last August, so I've been getting adjusted to the position. Previous to this, I've been working with small farms in and around the Twin Cities metro. I grew up in the metro, but my family farms in southeastern Minnesota and raises hogs as well. But I have a degree from the University of Minnesota in sustainable agriculture and food systems. And I spent most of that time focusing on small farms and community development. So small farm local foods is right up my alley. Thus far in the job, I've been doing a lot of agritourism stuff, a lot of focus on ag tourism and grant support and land rent information. Right now I'm working on some cybersecurity programming, later looking to offer a small farm startup school. So a lot of things in the works, but that's kind of the brief overview.
Awesome, thank you. And Josh?
Yeah, good morning, ladies, or day or afternoon or evening, watch these things. But so I'm Josh Krenz. My family and I farm in Princeton. We own Windland Flats. We have a 100-acre small hobby farm. Our primary business is grass-fed beef. We raise Highland cattle that we finish from start to finish with grass-fed. We also do a little bit of grass-fed lamb seasonally. We raise Shetland sheep for that. And then we also are a Minnesota NPIP certified hatchery. So we hatch out chicks in the springtime, and which mostly go to 4-H families and some small breeders as well. So we've been on this farm since 2007. Got a couple of small kids that do 4-H. I grew up on a dairy beef operation in Wisconsin. So I'm a 5th generation farmer and been farming my whole life. But this changed to more of a small scale and grass fed and intensive rotational grazing and direct to consumer marketing is new to me in really the last 15 years.
All right, thank you. And so I'm glad you guys both have very robust backgrounds in small farms and grew up on farms and, are still involved in the agriculture industry. So, I've heard common ways that small producers sell their products is through farmers markets and local restaurants or direct to consumers through their websites. And I'm curious, how does one stand out? How do they make a good looking website or find their carve out their niche at the local farmers market and find those returning customers?
Yeah, I can go first. I'll jump right in. So one thing that I talk to people about when they are just getting started and they're interested in doing exactly that is emphasizing that connection is such a big part of direct marketing, a lot of forms of direct marketing. And so to stand out and then find that ideal customer, you need to be engaging with folks. Visiting other farms and farmers markets is a great way to go, especially with an investigative mindset. See what's being offered, what people are buying, and storytelling additionally, talking about your background and finding the folks who gravitate toward that. That can play a very big role. Customers want to know who you are, how you grow your food, why you're growing it, why your farm matters. So sharing that story consistently builds loyalty. So, and it really does depend, your customer base will depend on what you're producing in a lot of ways, and the form of direct marketing you're using. So there is no silver bullet, but you kind of find what works for you. And the market research element, I think, can sound a lot harder than, or more complicated than it has to be, when in a lot of ways it really is just talking with folks. I think going to a farmer's market and just seeing what people are buying, what stalls are getting the most traction, can be really, really helpful. Yeah, there are a lot of little things to it, but that's what comes to mind first. What about you, Josh?
Yeah, and I would agree with most of what Lauren said. And we've got experience in all of those areas. We've done farmers markets, we sell through grocery, we've done restaurants, we sell through other retail locations. We have a store here on our farm. We sell off the web. We ship across the United States. And so, so we've done the gamut. It sounds like we've done a lot of things in that. So where's our focus? So we did kind of what Lauren was saying. We investigated. We went to different farmers markets. We found those that kind of aligned with who we thought our customer was. And so when we started off, we actually ended up in Maple Grove. That was a farmers market that we did from Princeton, because it fit more of the clientele that were looking for more of a niche grass-fed beef product. And so we did that for 1 year, and then figured out that the farmers market wasn't in the element for what we were really looking for, but it was a good test market to learn a lot of things. So part of it is you do a lot of investigation, but the second part is you just got to get in and get your feet wet, try some things, figure out what works over time. What has probably worked for us the most is the word of mouth marketing. And so enhanced by social media presence, but also with a website that people can direct and go to. Most of our orders today are placed through our website, whether those are at a drop point, a farmer's market drop point, or a retail drop point, and so forth. But most people come direct to the farm website to order those things today. But it's different for every farm. It's going to be different based off the products that you have. Ours are a frozen product, so transport isn't as much of an issue for certain things. We're also a USDA process, so we can cross borders and lines. So you got to make sure that you understand the regulations for the products that you're selling as well.
Awesome. And you brought up social media, and Lauren, you brought up connecting with your customer. Do you feel like social media is something small farms should be taking advantage of, or is that something that you've been helping out with some local residents and getting involved in social media?
Yeah, Josh just touched on it a little bit, but social media can be really, really valuable. I think in a lot of ways it does, similar to the last question, it depends on what form of marketing you're using, and then what audience you're reaching. There's, I think, specifically a younger, more digital connected audience. Social media is huge, but I think it's a big thing to take on. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it, especially with maintaining a consistent online presence. So it's not something that can just be slapped on at the end of the day. But I think the most effective strategy is something that incorporates both. And at the very least, I think having a profile online so people can look you up and put a face to the name is great, and probably the minimum of what you want to do. I mean, it depends on your audience, and then you can go all the way up to having, a really fleshed out website and online delivery or online ordering and a regularly updated profile, or multiple. But that takes social media strategy, which can be a lot, but you should be prioritizing consistency and honesty. And I think, yeah, social media is huge right now, and it's not going away. So I think it's absolutely something that should be considered, but word of mouth is still as, if not more important. So you should definitely be using both. One doesn't replace the other.
Yeah, and I look at social media as just another form of word of mouth, right? So and to what one of the things Lauren said with honesty, we always use the word transparency, which to me is kind of the same what you're doing. So So, we try to give people an in kind of in look of what we're doing, right? How do we raise the animals? What do we do here on the farm? And so it's that way of allowing people in. It's like, before social media, you'd actually invite people to your house, right? You don't do that anymore. And so it's a way for people to come and kind of see behind the scenes. How do we treat our animals? How do we take care of them? How do we do all of these things? And so that's part of where transparency, and we live in a world of where transparency is kind of expected, right? For everything, right? And so that's inherently what social media does, is it creates that. And we don't do every form of social media, because our target audience that we're working with is a Facebook audience, for the most part. And we've done a little bit of work on Instagram stuff, but our audience is not a TikTok audience, right? So you have to know a little bit about what your strategy is and who your audience is before you spend all this time, because the biggest suck is time, right? If you can spend all your time on doing one thing and get no new followers or no new influencers or whatever. So so from that aspect, you have to make sure you understand where your audience is.
And Josh, do you think that the consumer base is growing, the consumer base that wants to see those, regenerative practices and the way you treat your animals? Do you think that that's a growing base for you and other smaller operations?
Yeah, I certainly think it is. I mean, in this world of, transparency, people want to know that their animals, that they're consuming were treated humanely, right? It used to be, I always say like this, it used to be everybody knew a farmer, right? So if you go back, I'd say 2 generations, everybody knew a farmer, grew up on a farm, had a direct farm connection, and then we had a gap, right? There was a generational gap where a generation was even further removed from the farm. The current generation wants to come back to that, right? They don't want to farm, right, necessarily, but they want to understand the components that go into raising their meat, right, or their produce, or whatever it is, that product that you have. So that wanting to understand is different. It's a different kind of connection than in past generations, and we see that. So we kind of have 2 core audiences that we service. One is older generational that are looking for a healthy alternative. Heavy Facebook users, right? They go on there to see pictures of their grandkids and their kids and things like that. At one point had a farm connection, are looking to rejuvenate that and reconnect. That's us, right? And then the second audience that we have is families just getting started, younger families that are looking for now a healthier food, because before that they probably ate out more. Now they're eating in more, and so that they now want to have healthier food for their kids. They're also on Facebook because they're sharing it with their parents and their grandparents, right? That's the only reason that they use that platform otherwise, really. But we get to hit both audiences, and they kind of share back and forth, and so it works for us because it connects them in different ways.
Yeah, that's really great insight. Thank you. And I'm also interested in hearing about how small farms can kind of take advantage of diversifying their businesses in a way that larger, more industrial farms can't. Lauren, you kind of touched on agritourism in your introduction, so I'm kind of interested to hear about your work in that field.
Yeah. I think when it comes to industrial scale it's kind of in the nature of the beast, so to speak, that there's just a lot more money tied up in a more rigid set of things in a lot of ways. And small farms tend to have more flexibility. So there's space to experiment with smaller specialty crops or those heritage livestock breeds you've mentioned, and um, that's just more feasible. It's agritourism can be scaled up or down in a way I love. I think it can be a great way to find what fits for your farm and to plug in something. It can be as small as like a farm stand at the end of your driveway, or like a renovated barn to farm stay or hosting events. There's a lot of ways to cater it to your farm and your family. I think quality small farms also have the benefit of focusing on the quality over quantity element of things and can hit markets that really value those regenerative practices or the connection with the small farm and the family who grows the food. And in a way that a lot of large scale farms just can't, specifically with a lot of the regenerative practices, they just can't be scaled up to that degree. So yeah, I think agritourism to me is something that is just, there's no one size fit all. It's just something you can kind of tweak to fit your needs. And whether that's like a U-pick operation with berries or flowers or pumpkins or apple orchard or farm stay or event space, farm tours, on-farm meals, there's so many different things that you can do that you can cater to what you can do and what your family and your farm can handle and what you have space for and what your customers like and what your customer base values. So yeah, I love agritourism.
That's great. And Josh, when you moved to Minnesota to start your farm, did you know right away that you wanted to raise Highland cattle? And I'm kind of interested in your journey in that decision and expanding your business to include your Shetland sheep.
Yeah, no, great question, Lily. So I grew up on a small traditional farm. We're 250 acres, and we milked some cows, and we had beef cows, and so cattle has always been a passion of mine. I've done some agronomy things and some other components as well. But when I first moved to Minnesota, we lived in the Twin Cities. We lived in Mahtomedi. We had a small backyard, and I wanted to get back on the farm. And so when we finally got some acreage in Princeton here, I did some research. My wife doesn't have a cattle background, so she was very particular about what kind of cattle that she wanted to have. She was very much an advocate for having something that was more heritage. My background before that was in the beef side of things. We raised shorthorns growing up, and so it's still, a mainstream breed from that aspect. And so after doing a lot of research, I landed on Highlands because they're super efficient on converting grass into red meat. We've done some work around that to look at their efficiency and conversion. They're slightly smaller than if your Angus or your Hereford, so they're about 20% smaller. So they're not like a miniature breed. They're still big enough to produce 600 to 700 pound carcasses on a steer, which is what we still wanted to be able to do. They can still produce 18, 19 inch ribeyes, so good sized steaks. And so they kind of checked all the boxes. Plus, Highland beef is lower in fat, lower in cholesterol, and higher in protein. So it had some added benefits to it as well, because you can see in the painting behind me, they've got their long shaggy hair, and their horns is what they're known for. And that hair really helps with those health benefits, similar to like what a bison would be, because they have a lot of hair. They don't need to put on as much fat in the wintertime, so they tend to be leaner, but you get all that benefit still in a beef package versus another species. So yeah, it's a long component of how we ended up with Highland cattle, but we love them. We do a lot of work with them. We're active in the American Highland Cattle Association, North Central Highland Cattle Association, and lots of other activities within that realm of Highland cattle.
And how long did you take on that kind of research to come to that decision?
Yeah, so I had the advantage of I come from cattle, so I understand cattle. A lot of people that are starting off with a hobby farm maybe don't have a cattle background, right? Or they may have other background, other livestock, but they don't know all the different components of the cattle breeds per se. So I would say that for the period of my life, about 5 years that I didn't have cattle, I spent most of that time researching cattle. So I also, my undergrad, my minor is in animal science with beef emphasis. So again, beef I understand, but understanding the breeds and knowing how to research them, I have a little bit of an advantage. But I did spend a fair amount of time and went and visited some breeders, had some conversations, tried some Highland beef, and did some of those initial research before I selected cattle, and then continued to improve on them, because no matter what the breed is, um, especially from a heritage breed standpoint, when you get cattle or any livestock for that matter, there's a difference between just running them and managing them and being a farmer. And so we manage them, we try to improve them. They're heritage breeds, so we take advantage of their heritage characteristics, but we also try to improve on them to continue to make a quality, and then very important to the consumer, consistent product. That's the one thing consumers want, that the small vibe of a small farm, and they want to support local, and they want transparency, but they also want it to be consistent. And so I think one of the hangups a lot of times small farms get is they're maybe not consistent in their product. And that could be that maybe they're not consistent enough in how they raise it. Maybe the breed's not consistent enough. They're using a bunch of hybrid crossbreds or something, or maybe their butcher's not consistent, because a bad butcher can ruin a good product too.
Interesting. And thank you. And Lauren, for someone who maybe doesn't have that extensive background knowledge in, choosing what kind of animal they want to farm and what breed beyond that, are there any kind of programming that U of M Extension offers, or, what information out there is available maybe through U of M Extension or other kind of certifications that operators can look into to get some more knowledge about those issues and questions?
Yeah, within Extension, we have, well, even Sherburne County has our own livestock educator, Dana Adams. And many other counties in the area also have folks who focus on livestock. But Extension has a whole livestock team. There's so many resources outside of any formal event or workshops. There's so much out there, whether it's U of M Extension or other bordering states extensions. There's a lot, and our livestock team regularly has different workshop series. I'm not familiar of any that happen recurringly. I know there are some, but the best way is to get connected, get on the email list. That's how you can get those events as they come up. But yeah, and reaching out to your extension office is always a good baseline approach. That's entirely why we're here. So any questions, anytime, you can email your local extension office, and they would direct you to whoever can answer the question. It's one of the benefits of extension. It's just a huge network of resources. So there's really not a question that we can't find somebody who can answer. And as
Absolutely.
far as certifications, maybe Josh can touch on that a little bit. I'm not familiar too much with what would help with that initial learning phase, getting familiar with livestock.
Yeah, so one of the things outside of extensions, a great resource, obviously, but you can also reach out to different associations. So a lot of different associations, whether you're trying to get a heritage hog or heritage cattle or standard breed, there are associations out there for every breed, and all of those associations will sit and talk to you about the benefits of those animals. They all have some sort of starter program for people that are first getting into those particular types of livestock. So you could reach out to those as well. Obviously, once you have your farm and things, there are other certifications and things that you can get. There's a Minnesota Grown program that you can do through MDA. You can do the Minnesota Agricultural Water Quality Certification Program, MAWQCP, say that 10 times fast. So and once you get into those programs, there's resources within those programs too, both to help continue to educate yourself, but also to help educate consumers as well. So MAWQCP is especially good for people just getting started. It's a water quality certification, but there's so much more than just water that's covered as a component of that for someone who's trying to establish pastures, handling manure, understanding water lines. Those are all components where there's folks and expertise that are there. Same can be said for NRCS, where there's people on staff there that can help help as well for beginning farmers.
Yeah. And when you kind of work towards those, environmental benefits, you get recognized, I think, in a different kind of light from the consumers. And Josh, you were recently awarded with Sherburne County's Farm Family of the Year. Do you think that those kinds of you know, call outs, those kinds of accolades, do you think that they help you market your business in a way that makes you stand out?
Yeah, I think anytime that your business, in our case, our small farm, can be recognized for doing the right thing, right? I mean, that's kind of what it is. They're third party folks, in this case, Sherburne County, with the farm family there, that came in and said, that farm's doing a great job, and that's not just an award for small hobby farms. That was an award for all farms. So it's up against all farms in Sherburne County. So because I think sometimes small farms can get pigeonholed as, oh, they're just small farms, right? They're just niches. That's really a hobby farm, and we don't like to call ourselves a hobby farm, right? We're a small farm trying to make it just like any other farm, right? Our margins are different, our costs are different. We have to manage that, and so those third party awards or certifications are just a way of someone else saying you're doing a good job. And that does help, to your question, Lily. It certainly helps with recognition for consumers to be able to say there's a third party source that said that's a good farm.
Absolutely. And so for small businesses and farms, if if they're looking to expand their business and their margins, but maybe land acquisition is a limitation for them, is there any, do you have any advice for how to expand your business?
Yeah, I mean, we've done it in different creative ways. I mean, and Lauren hit it earlier when you were talking about agritourism. So part of what you do is you diversify, and you have to manage the assets that you have, right? And so your land capacity is limited. So you can only have so many cattle, so many hogs, so many chickens, whatever, based off of what that land can build you. So you have to manage with what you have. So we make our own hay, but if we didn't make our own hay, we could convert that all into pasture. We could import our hay from somebody else, right? And maybe that's a way that we increase our economics, because we could increase the amount of cattle that we could have, right? There are rotational systems that you can use for running livestock, to help optimize that. And then back to the other point that I was making about, take advantage of your other assets. You could look at doing agritourism days, or we look at agritourism a little bit different. Most of our agritourism isn't about selling the product at that time or charging for people to come, but it's about creating awareness for a future purchase. So we do a lot with Princeton School District here during the summer. There's farm days where families can come through the school district to come to our farm to visit the farm, and they don't have to pay. There's no charge, there's no cost to it. They don't pay anything. But it creates that sense of community. And then somewhere down the line, somebody will be like, I need some ground beef, I'm going to go buy some Winland Flats. We do that with other schools. We're partnering with Discovery Academy School in Princeton here in June, where we're having a farm dinner at the farm. It's all being catered in by a local restaurant, but they're using our beef on the farm, right? And so Winland Flats isn't making any money on that component of it. In fact, we're donating the steaks because it's a fundraiser for the school. So as a component of that, that is bringing in 100 new people on the farm who may or may not be aware of Winland Flats. It's our form of agritourism that then would lead to a future relationship purchase down the road. So those are things you gotta be creative. It's hard sometimes when you're running a business to say everything that I need to do needs to make money, right? But you also need to think about the long game. So building those relationships, having that transparency, going all the way through there, it's building on that generational gap that I talked about earlier, to fulfill what the current generation is looking for in a long-term relationship with a farmer, which is a long-term customer for us. And that's what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea and a great night.
I would also plug in if it fits for you, to check out the Minnesota Cottage Food Law. There are quite a few ways, if you've got the space and time and manpower, there's a lot of room within our cottage food law to make jams, jellies, baked things, pickles, all using, if your stuff you're already growing, or, baked goods. It can be, I would suggest making sure you know your market. Microgreen production is another thing that can be pursued, but you'd want to make sure you've got places lined up to buy before you start setting up shop. But there are little things like that. I know quite a few producers who found a lot of success adding a few things of jam to their farmers market spread. And that's not needing any extra land to do so. But you do need to, take into account their extra work. But if you got the people for it, I know it's a good way to involve more family too. I know a lot of people who found ways to tie in other family members who have interest in baking or drying herbs or what have you, and then getting them involved.
Yeah, that's a great idea and great advice. And do you guys have any, maybe expert tips for running a successful business? I came across some articles talking about how important it is to keep detailed and organized records and um, being organized when you're tracking cost and profits and making sure that you actually are turning a profit and Josh, like how you said, like when you counted all the time that you put into working and all of that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of farmers who don't value their time correctly, and so it's not a 40-hour a week job, it's a 120-hour a week job. So, so there's a lot of people who undervalue their farm, what their hourly wage should be in the farming community. So you have to do the best that you can still to track your margins and so forth. So we do use QuickBooks. So we put all of our there's other accounting systems out there as well, but we use QuickBooks to track all of our expenses and our income on that side of it. And then on the livestock side of the business, we use a program called Cattle Max. So we're tracking all of our cattle records. So that way we can see movement. It'll track pasture movement. It'll track different groups. So we can start to track what some of the labor is when we're moving things or how often we're moving things. Also, every time that we're handling animals, keeping any type of health records in there. So all of those things are important, whether you have it on a spreadsheet or a tablet or an online system. It doesn't matter what your system is, as long as you're able to track those things. Because I think that's for any business, but I'm always amazed when I'm talking to small businesses of any kind and how many of them don't know what their expense line is. They don't know what their margins are. And so can I pay my bills this month is not a good answer to running a successful business. You have to be able to pay yourself. You have to be able to save money. You have to be able to retire someday. You have to be able to acquire new assets when they break or, expand. So you have to be able to track and manage all of those things to reach those goals.
Yeah, adding on that, because I talk about this kind of thing a lot with smaller farmers, especially people. I get quite a few emails of people who live off the farm, maybe a couple of generations. They want to get back on. They just want to know how to start. And one of the things that I always emphasize is balancing that. When people talk about sustainability, a lot of times they think environmental, but when I talk about sustainability in this way, I mean, you want to make sure that you're creating something that will work for you long term, that you won't feel just burned out and run down 5, 10 years down the line. And I think that value of time and the real load, the workload, can be something that's minimized quite a bit. And you don't feel the effects until it's a little too late. Well, not too late, but you're feeling it. So creating a resilient business and ensuring, adaptability and building flexibility into your system, and also finding the things that you feel drawn to. You're not just looking for that financial element, not saying go into things with rose tinted goggles at all, but you don't want to try to form something around an idea you think will make you money if you don't think you'll like it. And I think that's something that it sounds a little obvious, but can get downplayed when you're, in that planning process. So plan not just for your profitability, but for your personal sustainability and your quality of life. And online tracking tools can be really, really helpful, specifically with business planning and tracking sales, labor, customer preferences, marketing efforts. There are all these different platforms, a lot of them through the U of M too, or created by U of M, that can help a lot with that. And it keeps human error in a lot of ways out. It can minimize, because we are all human and the numbers can be a lot. So yeah, I always suggest people try to find those platforms that they like and they trust, and make sure they're balancing their personal life alongside their work life.
Yeah. And so you mentioned that there's some of those resources on the U of M Extension website, just under maybe like the livestock portfolio,
Yeah,
or
I would suggest, so the Farm Center for Financial Management, I believe, is the one of the places that puts out a couple, like Ag Plan is one that I've been talking about quite a bit with ag tourism producers and small farmers. It's a business planning software that kind of walks you through developing a business plan. It can cater it to different scenarios. And there are similar platforms like that. And I would suggest looking at that, either the agricultural business management page on an extension. It's easy to navigate, and it would direct you to some of those resources, or the Farm Center for Financial Management. It's another good one.
awesome. Thank you. All right. And then just to close us out here, do you guys possibly have, one piece of advice or, one situation that you found yourself in that you had to work in that kind of took you by surprise, and, you know, how you got through that, or just a piece of advice of, something important that you've learned for someone interested in starting out in a small farm, or trying to improve the profitability of their small farm?
So I can go first while you're thinking, Lauren. So I would say that, the biggest thing is, if you don't have the experience, you need to find the experience, which we've talked about. And so for me personally, I had never done rotational grazing before. It wasn't a practice that we did growing up. It was a determining factor in the breed of cattle and the Highland cattle that we needed to decide on, because that's part of how they're, how you maximize their potential is by using grazed, heavily grazed pastures on a rotational basis versus trying to, grain feed them or anything else. And so I had a lot of hiccups with that when I was first starting, because I was raised where our pastures look like golf courses, and I was kind of old school, and our pastures don't look like that anymore. And so our pastures are tall and luscious pretty much all the time. But I had to learn, I had to fall on my face. I had to screw those pastures up a little bit. I had to go get some expertise. I worked with some NRCS folks, but then I also worked with other farmers who had been doing grass fed. I had to read a lot. I had to pick up some new habits and kind of break some old habits. And so that's what you have to do. And sometimes you don't know till you get into it, but you have to be willing to learn fast and change quickly.
Definitely.
That's a great one.
Do you, sorry, I know we're kind of at the end of our conversation here, but I'm interested to hear about changing to rotational grazing and the benefits and the soil health benefits that you experienced from that.
Yeah, so all the land when we bought this farm was all a corn soybean rotation, and we converted it all to pasture. And it's funny, the local farmers around here, they're great, good people, but the guy who had been renting the land said, I spent 40 years tearing fences out to watch you put it all back in, because that's what I did, to make all these smaller paddocks, to be able to make the rotational process work, and it makes a huge difference. I mean, last couple of years We've had some drought conditions, early spring drought last year. We're kind of in another drought right now. And so the pastures are still thriving and really making it through it. Whereas the corn and bean ground around us it doesn't look very good. And so, it's a testament to the health of those fields, our ability to retain water, all of those things. So we've seen a huge difference, and it's even a difference from when we first started our pasture to now because of all the things that I talked about. We changed our grazing patterns. We kept our paddocks keeping smaller and smaller and smaller. So it makes it more intensive on the labor side for rotating cattle, but it makes for healthier soil and healthier plants.
Awesome. Thank you. And Lauren, is there something that, a repeat question that kind of has come up a lot in your job?
Yeah, repeat questions. Well, a lot of them are just how do I get started? But another one too is grant questions. A lot of people reach out wondering what kind of funding opportunities there are for a specific situation they're looking to receive funding for. And grants can be a lot, but you can always reach out to your extension office. There are a lot of good resources online for writing grants. I would suggest spending more time than you probably think you need developing a grant. Is the answer to the question that's usually what I say, because it's a lot about storytelling and being very transparent and conveying the value of what you're wanting funding for to someone who has assumedly no background in what you do. So yeah, I'm going to make some grant writing support content resources sometime the next year or so. So keep an eye out. But yeah, that's a pretty frequent question I get.
It kind of just sounds like, connections, like your network is super important, right? There's
Yeah.
soil and water conservation districts in every county that have grant money available to farms, industrial and small farms. Josh mentioned NRCS, Natural Resource Conservation Service. They're an agency through USDA that has grant money to help, implement some conservation practices, and MAWQCP certification. Once you get certified for that, there's grant opportunities through that. So there's definitely lots of opportunity and lots of money out there, to help people and improve Minnesota's natural resource quality and protect that, as well as protect farmers' livelihoods. So just like you said, lots of time, researching as well as creating that story. So that's awesome.
Yeah. It's helpful to make a spreadsheet and start listing finding as you find them, because they aren't always offered annually, but just having some on your radar that you can keep an eye out for, and starting early in the year, your searching process can help you a lot.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Lauren and Josh, for taking the time and sharing this great conversation with us and hopefully with our viewers. And for our listeners out there, please stay tuned for more conservation-related podcast episodes from the entire Sherburne SWCD. We're partnering with U of M Extension staff for this summer podcast series. So thank you guys. And thank you, Josh, for joining us today. And thanks for our listeners for tuning in. All right. We'll see you next time.